Okay, so now for something completely different. So one of the things that we noticed as we started working more with providing access to confidential microdata was that it was very difficult to figure out how data were being used. And so what I'm going to talk about here is this push by both the current administration and by legislation to provide information about how data are being used. And I'm going to use the use case of NCSES data, not because I want to pick on them, but that's because this is the conference that we're doing, and I want to show how it is possible to use AI and ML to respond to Title II of the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. I'm going to shout out work that we've done with NOAA and with USDA ERS as in building the response. But you'll see here the interest in the government in providing public data assets, making information available about how data are being used, tell the public what's going on so that they can prioritize investments in data use. So this is a mandate, and it's also what the Biden administration is particularly interested in. Well, we've been here before. We had open data in 2009, and that has been implemented. Data.gov exists, and that's been criticized for the for its use and its intuitive lack of intuition as to what the value of the data are. Now, you know, in the private sector, we don't have too much trouble finding products that we're interested in. There's information about anything that you might want to find. You can find restaurants, you can find places to stay. Amazon happened to know I wanted to extend my Wi-Fi. Imagine if we had a search and discovery for data sets in the public sector the same way that we do in the private sector. Now, what's the disconnect? The disconnect here is that it's very hard to surface how data are being used in text documents, in publications, whether they're scientific or government documents or Federal Register notices at all. So what Amazon and Airbnb and so on, they essentially designed or developed an ecosystem which provided incentives for people to provide information. Now, imagine building an ecosystem where we, rather than forcing people to provide information about data, where we incentivize people. So I'm an economist, so I think it was interesting thinking about creative value proposition. If you create a value proposition for the key movers, like agencies, researchers, publishers, and taxpayers, if we create the right incentive system, then the ecosystem of providing information about how data are being used is going to fall out of that. So operationally, how might we do that? Well, the problem is right now, researchers or anyone who publishes any work in a government publication or so on doesn't really have the incentive to provide information about the data set. So let's start tipping that equilibrium. Let's find the data sets and publications. Let's think about how to, once you've found that publication data set dyad, let's document the topics and authors, which comes out of the publications. And then that's going to give you the ingredients to document the value of the data set. Now, the point is the plumbing's in place. There's an enormous amount of pieces that could be plugged together. We've got DataCite, we've got the National Secure Data Service being put together. We've got a federal CDO council. We've got private sector entities moving together. So how do we get that process started where those different players have an incentive to put things together? Right now, we don't. I'm going to pick on Wanying, three of the people who are on the call right now, Brett, Wanying, Bruce, and me. Here's a publication that we had that was cited yesterday, and we actually use SED data and Umetrics data. And here it is clearly labeled in the publication. It's not anywhere else. You can't find that this publication happened to use this data set. So how are we going to find it? What we're going to do is we're going to use machine learning, because a human being reading this can see this is the data that we're being used. So what we're going to do, and what we did, is build tools to go ahead and read 80 million publications and find the data sets in those publications, just like a human being would do. And then, so that's been done. And now what we can do is work with publishers to find out how what those data sets were used to study. So you can see this is the kind of work that the SED has supported. So you can click on that and find the underlying publication. You can find how many people have actually looked at that data and how many people have cited the data. So let me take the example of USDA, and another one of the agencies. Here's rural urban continuum codes. That's described on the ERS website. When you actually go out and read the publications that have used rural urban codes, who knew? Rural urban continuum codes are used to look at health status, breast neoplasm, Medicaid, suicides, healthcare disparity, childhood cancer survivors. None of that comes out just on that description, but it comes out when you read the publications that have cited that data set somewhere in the text. Out of that, you can build usage scorecards, for example, so that you can see in the SED, and this is just on open access data, not the full publication list, you can see the topics that are being used, who the authors are, what the ecosystem is that they live in. You can build data inventories for different types of outputs. And I know Jebin is going to be sitting there saying, but this is like the US News and World Report. It's going to get misused. The point is, it's going to be data, and then you get the community to figure out what are the sensible measures. So you've got a Betty Crocker set of inputs, and now you have to combine them to make sense of them. But that's what an ecosystem does. So here's the thing, you can do it. We can create these data usage scorecards and create sensible measures that convey how the information is being used. So that's my message in a nutshell.